Robots are taking your jobs. And if they haven't already, they will take your job in the future. Robots aren't your nice R2-D2s of yesteryear. They're taking your jobs.
What are you talking about, Michael?
Oh my God, it's the MAT 3000. No, but all kidding aside, I shouldn't make light of this. I mean, I should say specifically, if you work in professions like that are in industrial production, even potentially different types of service sector jobs in the future, you're very likely to be in danger of automation replacing you. And we've already seen this in certain sectors. And there's new research which has been highlighted in both The Economist and Vice, which is interesting kind of pair of places. But researchers at Oxford University, and this is, of course, coming in conjunction with the Oxfam study that 85 people alone command as much wealth as the poorest half of the world. So that's the context for research from Oxford that predicts that in 20 years, 47% of the world's currently existing jobs are likely to be automated. Now, obviously, there's a lot of caveats with all of this type of research, and you know, it's a very long out. You know, it's a long-term study. There's a lot that can happen. There's a lot that might not happen. Take it with a grain of salt. But the core point and the relevance of this research in the context we're in right now is that the kind of market fundamentalist response and the techno-utopian response in the past to different cycles of technological disruption and technological replacement is, well, new technological innovation replaces jobs as quickly as it sheds them. So maybe during the Industrial Revolution, a lot of people became redundant in agrarian economies, but they went to the city and they got jobs in the new factories, and they worked in the new economy. Now, of course, the standards around those jobs and the labor abuse issues and all that stuff is a whole other conversation. But roughly speaking, technological innovation in the past has not systemically led to exceptionally high levels of unemployment. It's generated along with shedding. But we see in what we've experienced so far of the internet economy, or whatever we want to call it, I try to think of the least obnoxious buzzword, but the massive corporations and success stories that are driving this information economy to the extent that it's being driven in technology. But even if we include like financial services and Wall Street and all this stuff, you're talking about larger and larger sums of money that are generated with fewer and fewer people and laborers necessary. So even Apple, you know, we know, okay, Apple, yes, they have some designers, marketing people, and other people in California. They employ relatively very few people. They have a chain of sweatshop labor in developing countries, which actually produces the hardware, but the design jobs and everything else, not a lot of people, basically taking up an office park in Cupertino and maybe a few other things. Twitter, how many employees does Twitter have? I mean, not more
Hundreds.
not more than a couple hundred. Google has a lot more employees, but again, that's still nothing on the equivalent of the kind of massive scale of employment that we associated with the industrial age. And then, of course, we know the other side of it is the growing service sector economy of people being paid poverty wages, the repression of labor, the repression of wages, and then the fact that automation might threaten those jobs as well. And I think that the context for this is it reminds us, and when I was reading this, I actually thought of Professor Blacker, who was on a couple weeks ago with Sam, talking about his book, The Falling Rate of Learning in the Neoliberal Endgame. And the notion is that we're going to have to take the debate and what we're thinking about politically and economically and how we're organizing even beyond the familiar, like, progressive Keynesian liberal thing. Like, yes, it's very important to support much more stimulus. It's very important that we listen to what Paul Krugman and others like that are saying. That makes a big difference. That will have a huge impact on the immediate employment situation, which, as we know, is the defining crisis of this era. Feeding inequality, feeding lowering living conditions and everything else. But around the next bend, and concurrently with the crisis now, is the fact that, as the professor said, what's worse than being exploited by capital? Not being exploited by capital. As this growth of automized economies continues, you're going to need fewer and fewer workers, and that also is going to feed the wealth gaps and inequality crisis. Now, this has been predicted by some people for a long time, that technology would lead to less work. There was a book in the 1990s called The End of Work, I think by Jeremy Rifkin. Now, one vision for less work is you take the surplus time and you invest it in people, and you invest it in solving social problems, and you have people actually, you lower the hours of the work week like France has done. France has, I think, I forget the specific hour, but France has an actual maximum amount of hours you can work in a week. And we recognize that obviously there's still a massive amount of social, ecological, and community problems that need to be solved that are laying there being wasted. Our human infrastructure, our actual infrastructure, all of these things are just laying dormant, while all of this energy and talent is either sitting and being wasted or being sucked into fewer and fewer economies, most of which don't even provide that much value, like the financial services sector. So we have two choices. We can start getting serious and thinking about the surplus of labor, the automation of work, and say, wow, this could unleash people to do more things, to recreate what the goals are of employment and work. Or we're going to go into an even deeper and deeper and deeper wave of stagnation and massive wealth inequality that, of course, will be exacerbated by all the other tax and anti-labor policies that we've seen so far. But I think it's important that we start thinking in these bigger terms in support of and along with addressing the crises that are right in front of our faces right now. You could follow up on this study. The piece in Vice, the rich and their robots are about to make half of the world's jobs disappear. There's also a cover story in The Economist. I forget the name of that story, but we'll link to the one or two of those stories on the blog. Really, and again, I think guys like Professor Black are important to think about in that kind of context.